It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Bill Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, Wednesday night edition, halfway through a busy week here on Sports Talk. Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, the Professor Tom Hayes. 800-956-7266 is how you can reach out and touch us tonight. A lot of basketball to talk about after last night's great win for South Carolina. Great win at home. Tough loss for Clemson on the road. They had a lead, could not maintain it in the second half. Tigers struggling in ACC play. South Carolina thriving in SEC play. A team that is having a great year so far. Clemson women, you might not know much about it because you're caught up in everything else, especially if you're a Clemson fan. But you need to pay attention to what Amanda Butler is doing with that basketball team. One loss in the league thus far, playing NC State tomorrow night, right there battling to be at the top of the ACC. She's doing a great job. She'll join us at 7:30 tonight here on Sports Talk. Mark Kingston, USC baseball coach, had us over today for a press conference at the Founders Park in Columbia. Not going to play any of that tonight because we'll be over at Founders Park tomorrow night, live with Coach Kingston as we travel around the state a little bit as we do for football. And maybe we'll start doing it for basketball too, and visiting with a few coaches. We were with Monty Lee last week up at Clemson, so we'll be with Coach Kingston tomorrow over at South Carolina. But he's ready to get going in year number 2. Got a lot of new names. In fact, he brought a roster with him jokingly to kind of emphasize the point that they've had such a turnover on their roster. But he likes the way the team has been working in the offseason. And he hopes that they will continue to work hard as they get into a team practice starting on Friday. The pitching situation will be a big question. And one thing that he has been exploring, as we're seeing now with some major league teams, in particular the Rays, is going with this situation where you bring in a back-of-the-end member of your bullpen.
They call it
an opener. To start games and let him go through the first 2/3 of the lineup. Hopefully he goes 2 innings. Then you bring your starter in to face the bottom third of the lineup in inning 3, and then he goes on from there. You hope to get him to maybe the 5th or 6th inning. Then you go back to your bullpen.
Well, this is a new kind of thing that, like you said, has been permeating through the major leagues. He talked not just with the Rays, but a couple of other professional teams. And I find it interesting, the ones he talked to, the Braves and the Dodgers, also were consulted by Mark Kingston. But a lot of this done out of necessity, because you're dealing in a situation where you probably thought your top 3 were going to be some combination of Logan Chapman, Graham Lawson, Carmen Majinski, maybe Ridge Chapman, maybe TJ Shook, maybe John Gilreath. But now with no Lawson and no Logan Chapman for the entire season because of offseason surgery, Majinski might be your number 1 guy. And then beyond that, it's kind of like, who knows?
Well, this is where the coaching comes in. You know, you got a lot of talented guys, but obviously their makeup is going to be tested because they've never jumped into the fray of big-time college baseball. But as we were talking off the air, well, you know, Mark Kingston doesn't really know who he has as starters, but it also means the enemy doesn't know what they're going to get. So this will be interesting in both parties. But South Carolina has enough good arms. I think they can find someone. I think always the key is to make sure that you got that bullpen set up. You know, I think that is tantamount as far as college baseball is
concerned. One thing he said about that today is that Sawyer Bridges feels as good as he has since he's been at South Carolina. And if he stays healthy, he was in the mid, he said 90s plus in an outing the other day. So if he's throwing like that and stays healthy, he will be the closer. So they know that if he's good to go, they'll have a guy there at the back end of the bullpen. He would not be one of those guys I don't think they would bring in as the opener or as a mid-reliever type.
And they got a couple of guys, too, like Wes Sweat and Reed Morgan, who can be very good back of the bullpen guys as well. They're going to have no problem closing out games if they are able to keep the lead. The one thing for them is whether they can actually get leads, and they're going to have a very similar makeup offensively like what Clemson has. They're going to have a lot more speed type guys. It's going to depend a lot on the health of TJ Hopkins and Noah Campbell at the top of that lineup trying to set the table. They won't necessarily have the power numbers that will jump off the page from guys like Jacob Olsen, probably your #1 power guy there for a threat. But, you look at the way that they're made up. I know that a lot of the preseason magazines didn't necessarily have them pegged for much, but they could make a similar run like they made last year just because they're going to have a lot of these developmental pieces that will at least make themselves go throughout the season.
Speaking of making a run, you were at South Carolina last night. You took it in with about 13,000 reported in attendance. That's a good crowd on
Very
a
good crowd.
6:30 Tuesday night tip. They beat a good team, which was minus one of their best players, but you've got to play with who you got. Of course, South Carolina is minus one of its best players and more. So they, too, are playing a bit shorthanded. But the Gamecocks showed some great resiliency last night. I thought that, Silva, what can you say? The guy was a man. He was a man out there last night. 5-1 in SEC play. Still got some tough games ahead, of course. Still got to play Tennessee and Kentucky and some others. But, my goodness, now they are a third of the way through their SEC schedule. You never would have thought they'd be 5-1 at this point.
It's hard to imagine that scenario, Phil, just because of the fact that they were a team that we looked at and we said, man, could they even get to maybe 30% of their SEC games going in? I mean, they were a team that was projected probably at the beginning of the preseason, maybe to win 3 out of their 18, maybe 6. But now they're projected as a team that at least can go 500 given what they have left in the league and kind of where the projections fall from the games that they played. But the one thing that they are doing is they are executing basically what Frank Martin has set up for them. And one thing, again, that I think this completely validates is that Frank Martin is a damn good basketball coach. And I think that anybody who a month ago who was trying to tell us, oh, we don't think Frank Martin can do it, I want you to show yourself. I want you to show yourself and cry uncle and say, you know what, I was wrong. I don't think any of us were saying that. But I'm sitting here and telling you that Frank Martin is a darn good basketball coach. He has gotten the most out of this squad. He got the most out of last year's squad, which proverbially stunk. This is a good basketball team.
Well, the key point is, obviously, you never had Cousinard. He never was eligible. You have Moss, who you now thought was your point guard. He gets hurt. He's redshirted. And then suddenly those freshmen that are playing have gotten some good experience. They played with a core of 7 to 8 players, and they now almost know where each other is on the court on any given play, especially when the defense is set up. So I think early on we knew that this team was not old, and if the youngsters improved, they had a chance to do something.
And a guy who's raw now, but I think who'll be a fan favorite by the time he's done here, if he ends up playing his entire 4 years in South Carolina, is Keyshawn Bryant. I mean, there were a couple of moments last night where he had a couple of almost dunks that would have brought the house down, but he's somebody who I think as he continues to mold into what Frank Martin wants him to do, he'll be a very key player. And he could be somebody who guys want to play with in the coming years.
I agree. I
think
that kid is a talent, and he just has to keep working hard. And again, the key for Frank and this whole situation now is holding this group together and then adding some good pieces. You're going to miss Silva, no doubt about it, after this year, but everybody else for the most part is coming back. And if he can hold it together, keep the transfers down, this looks like a good group. Doesn't look like a group's going to get in any problems where you have to run people off. They got a chance here now to put together a team for the next 2-3 years that's going to be heard from. And they may not be done right now. Pro, it's one of these situations where they probably don't realize what they're doing. They're going out and playing and having fun and winning some games. And they're sort of like, they're not really caught up in the idea of being 5-1 in the SEC and being among the league leaders right now.
They're caught up in playing the game. And Frank Martin talked about it. We talked about, don't worry about the crowd, where you are, what the game is. You just concentrate on execution and just check the scoreboard later. But you got to remember this. Next year, because of the injuries and the red shirt and the forced red shirt of Cousinard, you actually have a recruiting class that's with 6 people.
And you got Levesque coming in. You got possible development of Frink. I mean, they look pretty set for a bit.
Okay, We want to get to your phone calls. What do you think about what we're talking about and more? 800-956-7266, the number. We'll be right back.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. It'll be fun to get a chance to be over at Founders Park tomorrow to see Mark Kingston. We're over there to see that new scoreboard over there.
Good looking.
Today.
Going to be very, very nice. Just a big black board. It's going to be all digital.
You were very much a complainer of the previous.
Well, I mean, just for me, I can't speak for anybody else. I had a hard time with the innings, differentiating the innings because, I mean, I have eyesight like a hawk. And
if a hawk is blindfolded,
I had a hard time tying in the inning with the actual number. It was all blurry to me. This is going to be big, broad numbers, going to be bright. I'm having trouble
Maybe
picking out
brought
the inning.
Scoreboard from Fenway Park in, let the guy by hand put the numbers
I have
up.
to say, I don't mean to disparage any other park or anything else that's in our state, but that is literally one of the most professionally done, manicured, amazing fan experience ballparks that I've been to at either the collegiate or minor league level. Founders Park is just immaculate.
That's fantastic. Couple of quick notes. We'll get to your phone calls. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. From Virginia Tech, their quarterback, Josh Jackson, according to the Richmond Times-Dispatch and ESPN.com, he has put his name in the NCAA transfer portal, John. And so he is –
That's funny.
That's my name for it. That's where you go to dispose of things.
Well, you know what they said, the players.
Well, they don't dispose. The players go inside the portal.
Well, it's voluntary. Don't you voluntarily go into the portal, John?
But the only thing they tell them is once you get in there, don't flush.
Brian loved it last. He loved it.
The only thing they tell him is once you enter the portal, don't flush.
Yeah. So he also on Tuesday, Eric Kuma, wide receiver, and tight end Chris Cunningham announced their intentions to transfer. So that's at least 3 from Virginia Tech. I'm not sure. South Carolina technically had 5 in the portal, John, if you count the walk-on defensive back. Maybe you
Corey Banks?
No. Who just announced the kid that transferred from Gardner-Webb? Jalen Foster.
Yes.
That would give them actually, 5. I don't know how that stands nationally. It's a pretty big number.
Yeah, it's funny. Fuente put out a statement today, and he was just like, "Oh, I understand this, and that," and it's weird. These coaches have to be careful with these statements because you come off a little too sanctimonious, and it doesn't necessarily make a good look for recruits. I mean, you have to really toe the line. And Will Muschamp, to his credit, really spoke to this more to the Debo Samuel situation they did with the transfer. But like when you say things like, "I support the student athlete," that'll play and that gets noticed, especially in these circles.
I think that's just automatic, blindly saying that. I don't want to get back into the Debo thing, but here's the question.
But you have to say
when a guy puts his name in the transfer portal, John, he doesn't have to transfer.
No,
it's a chance for him to sort of check out the landscape, see who might be interested. But you as a coach, especially now in January, you're recruiting, and so your 3rd or 4th running back who you are counting on for depth is thinking about leaving. Do you have to go and recruit another guy? And if you do get a commitment, you got to think about space and numbers, the 85 number. How does that impact you in recruiting here in the latter weeks of the recruiting period?
Well, the other part of this too is that this is just a transfer of the power from coach and school to player. And this is kind of become reflective, almost the way that the NBA has made this happen, not necessarily transition into basketball, but you even see this in that game as well. And the fact that the power, which used to be so much on coach and scholarship and play and school, is now in the hands of the player.
Well, see,
they hold all the leverage now.
What's scary is you think about weird things. You almost have to think not out of the box, but just think about human behavior. When I was looking at Kyler Murray and then suddenly he took off at Oklahoma, my mind went, uh-oh. Because one quarterback sees this work, and now Jalen Hurts goes over here. Hey, you know what? I can go right and transfer right. And before that, Russell Wilson transferred to Wisconsin.
Well, I don't know.
So it scares you.
For everyone that it works, though, it doesn't necessarily well.
Call me selfish. I don't like it. We're getting into free agency here for college athletes.
It doesn't always work, though.
I just don't like it. I don't like one and dones. I don't like the free agency we're seeing. The grad transfer rule is just being abused completely from what it was designed to be.
With the Notre Dame guy?
That's what I was thinking of that year.
Auburn has named Cadillac Williams its new running backs coach.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's jump to the phones. Folks have been waiting. 800-956-7266. Tiger Bryan in Lancaster. I'm sure he's popped a couple of cold ones while he's been on hold. Tiger Bryan, how are you?
No, I ain't popped that too, man.
How you doing, TB? Good to hear from you.
I'm doing good. Hey, man, I wasn't on damn Crow after we beat Alabama, but I got a couple of comments and questions, and I know y'all know more about Yeah, y'all do this for a living. I just listen to y'all. I'm blessed to listen to y'all. The Corey Miller interview, he had like his son would have made a difference in that game. Come on now. But in the NFL games this week, did y'all think that was kind of a little shady with Las Vegas? You know what I mean?
Well, as far as Corey goes, he sent us a note that said 70% of the time that Christian is on the field at Alabama gets pressure on the quarterback. So he really does believe that had his son played,
ask
they
Frank.
would have gotten some pressure on Mr. Lawrence. Now, would it have made, that much of a difference to slow down a Clemson offense that was clicking on all cylinders in the second half?
Ask Frank Martin how he feels about plus minus. Not a fan. So from that standpoint, I think that stat when it comes to football, I don't want to say it's hogwash. Seems like hogwash.
Clemson's offensive line just did a great job protecting Lawrence.
Game plan.
And their receivers did a tremendous job getting open, and they made some difficult catches. Ross made a couple of tough catches, one-handed catch, and they made their quarterback look really good, but he also made them look good.
I could see some discrediting if it was a game that had played maybe like the first two between these two schools in this little series that they've had. Alabama got the crap beaten out of them. 44-16. I mean, I'm sorry. That game wasn't close. It was not close. There was no one player who was going to make a difference in Alabama coming close in that game. They got their ass beat.
A defensive end pass rusher like Khalil Mack. I'm not comparing Christian Miller to Khalil Mack, but I'm just saying a player like that can make a difference. I mean, you watch the Bears, and Khalil Mack made life miserable for quarterbacks. Now,
but it's not like Khalil Mack is on scholarship at Alabama.
No. But what I'm saying is, if just going by what Corey's theory was, if his son, and he was very good, he was one of the top pass rushers on their team this year. If he's healthy and able to be in there and rush the quarterback, it might have upset the apple cart some. It still wouldn't have saved Alabama from Tagovailoa's pick six and other issues they had on the offensive side.
Or Nick Saban calling a fake field goal at the 35-yard line, like a field goal safe defense.
Well, Tiger Bryan, the key point to what Clemson did is everything in the last two games, in the national championship game and in the SEC championship game, that Georgia didn't do. Georgia had their foot on Alabama's neck on both games, but they let the foot off. When Clemson got their foot on Alabama's neck, they didn't let up. And that's the difference in those games. Because when you looked at Clemson when that game started, they looked like Georgia did in the SEC championship game and in the national championship game last year. But this time, Alabama got hold of a team that did not let up.
The one thing that Corey said that was right is that Alabama looked like an ill-prepared team. They looked like a team that wasn't prepared to play Clemson. It looked like they were prepared to play a game, but they prepared in a way that they were basically primed to play every other game. It wasn't like they had a specific Clemson game plan in my mind, whereas Clemson looked like a team that had been preparing for Alabama since August.
Yeah, somebody pointed out to me one thing Clemson did in that game was go without a tight end. Now, of course, one of their tight ends was suspended, but that allowed them to spread their receipt to get Higgins and Ross on the field at the same time. And also defensively, their game plan was to give up yardage in the middle of the field, but to really clamp down when they got into the red zone.
Bend but don't break.
Exactly. And they also had an idea on how best to defend Tagovailoa, and obviously it worked out well for him. All right, 800-956-7266. More of your calls coming up here on Sports Talk.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. You know, I hate to be this guy when it comes to Clemson and their basketball team this year, but if you didn't see a significant problem kind of boiling from the underside of it, when you saw how little offense they were getting from guys outside of Shelton Mitchell and Marquise Reed and occasionally Elijah Thomas when he stayed on the floor, when you didn't see that in a non-conference season, you had to wonder just how it was going to go in the ACC season. And I know that they've played pretty tough competition to start. They played 4 games against teams that are I would say, I won't say significantly better than them. Two of them they're significantly better than, and 2 are kind of about even, and one that they are better than in Georgia Tech, the one game they won. But if you couldn't see this coming, then you don't know a lot about basketball, because you could kind of see this coming from a mile away, and it really is kind of rearing its ugly head right now for Brad Brownell's squad. Yeah,
I mean, their bench is short. Last night, Clyde Trapp gave them 27 minutes and 9 points. That was pretty good. But outside of that, they got very little from Hunter Tyson and John Newman III. And
their bench,
Devon White played a little bit.
Their bench got outscored by 34.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
You know, last night they had their hand on the throat of this game late in the first half. Florida State closed strongly to get within 5. And then it was within 6, 41-35. Clemson scored first in the second half to go up 8. Mm-hmm. Then Florida State hit them with a 13-0 run in there, turned the game around. And then, Clemson did not finish well either. Reed did not have the kind of game he had against Georgia Tech. He's got to be a big-time scorer every time out. I think everybody knows that. 4 for 11 for him from the floor, 13 points, but only 1 3-pointer. Tigers gave up 10 3-pointers last night, and a guy off the bench, David Nichols, had 4 of those. He had 16 points on the night. Yeah, you mentioned the bench scoring. Florida State had, I think I counted up 9 different guys score last night, and they had 8 different guys play at least 10 minutes. Most played in the 20, so they got a much deeper bench. Here's the other thing we're talking about looking ahead for Clemson. Boy, I tell you, the schedule makers did not do them any favors. As you look ahead to what they've got coming up on their schedule and the tip times, do you realize that the rest of their home schedule, they either play at 9 o'clock or noon?
It's bad.
They've got 9 o'clock next Tuesday, noon on Super Bowl Sunday, noon the following Saturday, then 9 o'clock on February 19th. What day of the week is that? Is that a Wednesday? What day of the week is that?
Which day is
Feb 19th.
That's
a Tuesday. That's a Tuesday.
That's another Tuesday at 9.
Tuesday.
Back home against Boston College at noon. And then, okay, I take it back. The North Carolina game.
It's still yet to be determined.
We don't have a time on that.
But I'm saying that's either a 4 or an 8:30, and it's on the same day.
North Carolina.
Where? It's at home, but it's also the same day as the Clemson South Carolina baseball game in Greenville.
Yeah.
And it's either a 4 o'clock or I believe it was an 8 was the other one, the other option. So neither of those is necessarily the best. 8 would probably be the best option if you wanted to try and hit both, but there'd be a lot of people who want to hit that Greenville game.
Yeah, Roy will want that game at 4. The ACC accommodate Roy when you want it.
And then
75% of that crowd then will be the ugliest color blue you could ever imagine.
Last game of the regular season, Syracuse on March 9th will be a noon. Those are just killer tip-off times for a program that is stressed out trying to get people to attend at regular hours. I mean, they can't get a 2 o'clock tip in the afternoon on a Saturday at home or an 8 o'clock tip. I mean, I know an hour you might say doesn't make much of a difference, but if Clemson basketball is not winning at a high level, people are not going to turn out. And we saw that last week when they played Georgia Tech. It was a pitiful crowd. And moving forward now, you're probably going to see, especially if they lose to NC State on Saturday on the road, which they probably will, when they play Pittsburgh at home next Tuesday night, you're going to see another sparse crowd.
And that's no gimme with Pittsburgh either, because Pittsburgh is much improved. And
Jeff Capel.
The other thing about what really makes this terrible for Clemson fans is that, and you guys both know this, they rely on a lot of commuters for much of their, at least, basketball crowd. Their basketball crowd is more of a Greenville, an outside crowd than it is necessarily a Clemson crowd. Anderson,
Mm-hmm.
Pendleton, things of that nature. You're not getting a lot of people in Clemson proper who are going to basketball games, and because of that, you need to have a time that really caters to that, and none of these really do, especially the noon. I mean, noon is very, very early on a Saturday.
Well, one of the key points with Clemson, the only thing that got me before the season started is how do you adjust to that next season? Because you went to the Sweet 16, and now even your opponents view you differently.
Mm-hmm.
They may work a little bit more on seeing what you do and disrupt it. That's why I thought it was important that Skara came back, because I thought he was sort of like a glue player. But I don't think that the entire Clemson team has accepted the fact that they are not at the cream of the crop, but they're more of a hunted than they were last year. It was almost like anything you do now is gravy. Plus, Phil, I know Phil disagrees with me, but I've always thought beforehand, and when they had to do it because they were refurbishing Little John, I always thought whetting the appetite of fans by having in the non-conference some big-time school come to Greenville and play them, just to get them excited. And that one year they did play in Greenville, they were a pretty good basketball.
And they've had some of their best games when they got a point output from Shelton Mitchell that was representative and someone who was at least part of that main key cog of scoring. He has not shown up, especially in the last 4 games, 5, 5, 2, and 6. After scoring 11 against Duke, it's just not been his season so far.
Yeah, I wonder if the knee's bothering him.
Yeah.
It might still be a bit of a problem. He is distributing the ball. He's getting some assists. I mean, he didn't score much against Georgia Tech, but he had 9 assists. I think last night he had like 4 or 5 assists.
4.
Now, tonight in the SEC, there's no ACC tonight. There's no state games tonight. We've got Tennessee at Vanderbilt, and Georgia at LSU, and Missouri at Arkansas. What do you think about this, about basketball scheduling? We all love college basketball. Some places love it more than others. And in most places, correct me if you think I'm wrong, I don't think the interest is really dialed up until January when you get into conference play. Why don't we
later than that?
Why don't we extend conference play into December in a big way? I know sometimes you got some leagues that'll play a single conference game in December. Why don't we play more conference games? Why don't we extend the conference slate into December to generate more early interest?
Well,
why don't we just use those first couple of weeks of November to play your marquee games, your special matchups, your little tournaments, whatever? When December hits, let's get into the conference schedule. Let's let everybody in the SEC play everybody round. Let's get back to playing home and home throughout the league. Don't you think, especially on Tobacco Road, but in the ACC, don't you think everybody should play home and home? Let's do that.
Well, the ACC is doing that to a point beginning next year, and that's something that they talked about at Operation
Well, they're
Basketball.
adding 2 more games, right?
Well,
are they going to 20 league games?
They are, but they're going to play one of them in December. All the teams are going to have a I believe both those games actually are going to be, there's going to be one, I believe, around Thanksgiving is where they said, and then they're going to have another one in December. So each of these teams will have at least 2 conference games under their belt before they begin the bulk of the season, and that's, again, to try and drum up more interest early in the season. I don't think extending the conference season is the answer. I think you need to get rid of some of these pre-Thanksgiving time tournaments. I almost feel like you begin your season with that at the beginning of December. Maybe you begin the conference season around Christmas and do it that way. I think that there's just too many non-conference games that people don't care about that are being played.
Absolutely.
That just, in my mind, really dilute what you have. Because, again, here's the issue. And Frank Martin's going to run into this when he walks up to the NCAA Tournament Committee. Their team now probably maybe could have stolen one of those games in the non-conference season that they played that have basically weighed down their non-conference schedule. Well, they definitely should have beaten Wyoming, regardless. And they probably definitely should have beaten Stony Brook, regardless. Maybe they win that Providence game. Maybe they win the Wofford game. Maybe they mess around and beat Michigan. Who knows? Michigan's one of the best games they played all year during the non-conference season. They didn't win. So from that perspective, I just feel like you have too many opportunities to stub your toe, and it really makes teams like in South Carolina's position behind the 8 ball.
But see, without the non-conference games, you wouldn't have Furman upset Villanova. I mean, so you look at it on the other foot.
But what does it mean? I mean, it's good for Furman, but what does it mean across the country?
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
800-956-7266. You want to talk about what's going on with South Carolina's amazing start to SEC play and Clemson's woeful start to ACC play, beg your pardon. Also, the baseball season's about 3.5 weeks away. South Carolina getting ready for Liberty a couple weeks from Friday, and Clemson getting South Alabama in town. So those seasons will kind of get going. One thing I found interesting from Mark Kingston's speaking today is that South Carolina might kind of buck a trend and do one of these preseason tournaments here. A lot of times these schools want to come here to the Palmetto State because they're coming from, colder weather places. So South Carolina and Clemson don't necessarily find themselves in some of those preseason tournaments. But he was thinking possibly next year going out to do something in Texas, I believe.
Yeah, Houston is starting up a tournament. This is something new for baseball, kind of like what basketball does. And it is something that is of interest to him. It is something that I think he did when he was at Tulane as an assistant coach. They went over to Houston and played in a preseason tournament. Of course, I say it's new. Heck, I mean, Coastal Carolina has been hosting tournament after tournament in February and March for years, baseball at the beach and the Caravelle Resort and different sponsors because – you've got teams in the Northeast and the Midwest who can't play at home.
Right. Yeah, Missouri starts a tournament every year. Usually they go out to like Corpus Christi or they'll go to California or Florida to play every year. Like they played in Naples last year. So, I mean, it's a situation where a lot of these northern teams need places like South Carolina and Clemson to kind of go and do that. But the need for Carolina and Clemson to do that just isn't so, just because of the fact that they also play very intense schedules, not just in the non-conference, but also in their conferences as well.
All right, going to have recruiting in a moment. We'll also let you hear some of the post-game comments from Frank Martin and Brad Brownell from last night, and Amanda Butler joining us at the bottom of hour number 2 on this edition of Sports Talk. Billy in Surfside Beach, you're up next with us tonight. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, man. It just started raining a little bit. Hey, that was a dagger for Clemson last night, I think, with Florida State. I mean, I watched Clemson pretty much run the 5-man rotation, and I just thought that Florida State's about as inconsistent as they come, and they got that win in Tallahassee. I looked at Clemson's schedule coming up. I mean, it doesn't get easy in the ACC. I'll use a phrase from idiot. I'm sorry, Phil, from Corey Miller. If South Carolina was in the ACC, they'd probably have one win right now. But anyway, that's another story for another day. I
had a feeling
on Corey like that when he's not here to defend himself.
I was wondering when somebody was going to try and bring up that comparison. That was only a matter of time.
Well, listen, it stands to reason, and we've said this many times. Hang on, Billy. We've said this many times, and it's no great secret. South Carolina and Clemson live in different neighborhoods in their different sports of football and basketball. And, the SEC is better, but it's still not ACC basketball. And ACC football right now is terrible. And it's going to take a while for it to get to the level that SEC football is. Even when the SEC is not great with 6 or 7 really good teams, it's still really, really strong with at least 3 or 4 good teams.
SEC hoops is better, much better than ACC football.
I would agree with that.
And not only that, it's only going to get better because of the fact that the teams that are in there are all young. And for the first time, it seems in at least a generation, they are dedicating themselves to making sure that basketball is a major player, not just from the scheduling, but from the coaches who have infused this league and the players who have done so.
Well, the coaches too.
That's what I just said coaches.
Yeah, those coaches. Tom Crean, 10 years ago, even unemployed, would not have even thought of going to Georgia.
Anything else, Billy?
Hey, I'd like to take comments off there. I'll make this real quick.
Yeah.
I know you got a lot to get to.
Do recruiting.
Fellas, comment on this. These next 2 years coming up with Trevor, did you see them getting another national championship? Because I think that offense is going to be insanely good. And I think that defense will probably drop back to about 14th or 15th. But you know how Venables knows how to get pressure. And I'll take your comments off there. Does Clemson get them? Does Trevor get one more?
Do you think?
You're just guessing.
Do you think they can average 50 points per game? Can they average 50 points per game on offense against that schedule next year?
Only 50. 50 is a lot.
It depends on.
There's 45.
If Dabo thinks like he does, I want to play for a national championship.
Oh, it's probably going to be.
He'll get the score up early, and they may not get to 50 because he pulls everybody.
That's the thing. That's the problem.
Yeah, he's going to pull guys out.
They're going to do the old Tony Elliott thing where we'll give Travis about 16 touches and then give 10 each to Feaster if he's still there and Lynn J. Dixon if he's still there. I mean,
this year they averaged 44. They averaged 44 points a game this year. That's just one more touchdown. That's just one more touchdown.
I will say this. The one thing that does concern me about them going into next year is having to replace all those starters on defense. It is not just a defensive line. It is a linebacker. It is a corner. I mean, it'll be a situation where you're going to have a lot of different.
I think their corners are going to be fine. I mean, the freshmen that they brought in, Goodrich and McMichael, they got some good play last year, especially McMichael. I'm not sure how much did Goodrich play. He played some.
He played more than McMichael did.
Well,
they got some experience, and I think that you got Terrell back. Of course, he's going to be solid at one corner. I'm not as worried about them from that standpoint.
Linebacker is my big concern.
Muse is back at a safety spot. They've got to get better in the safety position overall.
Muse needs to move to linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
To linebacker. Here's the other key. Those guys got a lot of experience, and they look good behind what I would call a generational collegiate defensive line.
Yes.
Now, suppose you don't get the penetration that you got from the line that just left. Then those defensive backs will really be.
I still think Xavier Thomas was going to be a freak.
You got Wallace back at safety. Turner's back. Muse is back. Johnson is back. You've got Terrell, Lee Anthony Williams, McMichael, and Goodrich back all at the corner spots, and they're adding, of course, some guys who will have a chance to come in and play right away and get some early playing time. They signed some guys who are considered to be among the top corners and safeties in the country. Those guys out of the Atlanta area in particular.
The one, again, position that worries me, again, is linebacker, because a lot of those guys who they signed at linebacker are not early enrollees.
Well, you've got Shaq Smith, you got Chad Smith, you got Jamie Skowski.
My guy.
They'll find a place for Isaiah Simmons. No, wait a minute. Is he? No, he's back, right?
He's back.
He did not go.
He did not go.
All right. So, yeah. And again, these numbers will increase as the next class comes in. Up front, Xavier Kelly is a guy that has gotten a lot bigger since he got there. I expect you're going to see more out of him. You mentioned Xavier Thomas, KJ Henry on one side. You're going to have Darnell Jeffries, Niles Pinckney, Jordan Williams, who slid inside. And I expect we're going to see more out of Logan Rudolph and Justin Foster. So
Foster is good.
All right, let me get to recruiting. Got a lot of recruiting. For those of you who weren't with us last night, we'll recap a few things as well from last night. But the top story today, caught up with Jamie Robinson finally, the cornerback out of Leesburg, Georgia. He tells us that he is not visiting South Carolina this weekend. That's been rumored out there on some of the websites, but he said he's not visiting South Carolina. As of today, he's not planning to. Now, he is having a visit tomorrow from Gamecock defensive coordinator Travaris Robinson, and that'll be big for South Carolina. He also has Tennessee, Auburn, and Kentucky on his short list. He has taken officials to all four schools. He said there's no favorite among the four at this point. He's just looking for that, quote, home feeling. He doesn't plan to announce until signing day. Checked in with cornerback DeQuantius Watts, who will take an official to Louisville this weekend. Originally, it was going to be Oregon, and he had mentioned last week that Oregon was no longer going to happen. So it's going to be Louisville. He was at USC last weekend. Now, Will Muschamp and Brian McClendon met with Watts today at his school. He's got basketball practice tonight, so there'll be no in-home visit. So that visit between Muschamp, McClendon, and Watts took place today at his school. USC is in the final 12 with 2020 offensive lineman Chris Morris of Memphis.
Don't read them all.
Memphis, Florida State, Texas A&M, Purdue. And I'm halfway done. I should finish.
And others.
Texas, Florida, Alabama. I'm almost done. Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Georgia. USC offered 2020 receiver Justin Robinson, 6'4", 207, out of McDonough, Georgia. He's got several other big-time offers. All right, we will finish up the recruiting on the other side of the break.
Round 2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Back we are, Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, Professor Tom Hayes. Busy hour coming up. Amanda Butler will be here at the bottom of this hour. Going to finish up recruiting here in just a moment. Basketball-wise, Tennessee out to an 8-2 lead on Vandy playing in Nashville. Georgia and LSU just underway in Baton Rouge. It's Georgia up 5-2. There are no ACC games or state games tonight. Let me wrap up the recruiting because I got some more interesting stuff for you. USC offered, I mentioned this, 2020 receiver Justin Robinson, McDonough, Georgia. Good size here. So this is two guys they've offered the last couple of days who are 6'4", and have good length. 6'4", 207 here. 2020 defensive lineman Macias Scott of Gainesville, Georgia, plans to visit USC Saturday. Hammond School quarterback Jackson Muschamp, offered by Western Carolina. 2020 receiver Jalen Coit of Sharon, offered by Vanderbilt. USC offered 2021 offensive lineman Amarius Mims, 6'6", 273 of Cochran, Georgia. Clemson 2020 quarterback target DJ Uyanglele was offered by Texas A&M. I'll be ready for that name when he gets to Clemson.
Uyanglele.
Uyanglele.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Recruiters from Georgia were at Hammond School in Columbia yesterday to check on 2020 defensive tackle Alex Huntley, 2020 defensive end Jordan Birch. Samford and Georgia Southern also were in to check out Muschamp and linebacker Saul Diaz. Florida State was in yesterday to see running back Jamias Griffin of Rome, Georgia, who decommitted from NC State Monday. His coach told us that there's a degree of interest from Clemson, but he hasn't heard from the Tiger recruiter, Tony Elliott. He has taken officials to Auburn and Georgia Tech. Clemson target, 2020 receiver Xavier Capers was at Georgia Tech Monday. He's been a strong lean to Clemson. Plans to visit there this weekend. Clemson target, 2020 defensive back Luke Hill was offered Monday by Ohio State. Dorman offensive lineman Mason Trotter will visit Louisville this coming weekend. USC offensive line target Darius Washington was offered by Florida State and Georgia Tech. Also had an in-home visit with several Mississippi State staff members on Monday night. He's been committed to State, but has taken other officials to USC and to Miami. And Socastee cornerback Kenny Solomon will take an official to Rutgers this weekend. He was at Louisville this past weekend. Coaches from Rutgers were in today.
They're trying to replicate the Hunter Renfrow formula is what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. Mentioned this last night. I'll mention it again from John Whittle, the Big Spur. He reports that former professional baseball player K.J. Woods from Fort Mill will walk on with USC as a tight end. Former fourth-round draft pick of the Marlins, and he spent 5 years trying to make it in professional baseball, and he did not make it in professional baseball to get past really, I guess, maybe single A. And so he's going to give college football and playing tight end for the Gamecocks a shot, much like Mr. Hurst did. Mm-hmm. And USC offered wide receiver Josias Credle, 6'4", 195 of Columbus, Georgia. He also has offers from Oregon, Virginia, and and Tennessee. He had 40 catches for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns last season. He said the coaches like his tall frame and his ball-catching ability. He hopes to visit USC next month after he gets his SAT, ACT score on his transcript. And he said he was very excited to get the offer from South Carolina, and he thinks this is something big. So we'll keep an eye on that. But that's another of the tall receivers. You know, they see the success they've had with Brian Edwards. They see the success that Clemson has with their tall receivers. You got to have some tall receivers to help counter these cornerbacks who are growing in size too. You know, defensive coaches now are trying to find the taller cornerbacks to match up with these taller receivers.
Well, they're talking about catching radius. So not only tall, but length. That can save a quarterback when he makes an errant throw.
Wingspan to be able to gain separation, and also you're going to be able to run too. It's
gain separation. Anything like pushing off?
Yes, that's exactly what that is.
Want to remind you to keep a close watch on our recruiting info on our website, SportsTalkSC.com, on Twitter at SportsTalkSC, And on Sunday nights, we are dropping the recruiting podcast where we wrap up everything from the week and from the weekend. And it gives you a chance to, if you're out for a stroll or you want to take a nap, whatever, gives you something to listen to kind of put you in that mood.
And last night after we were off the air.
Oh, yeah. Shiloh Sanders committed to, it happened like 8 o'clock, 8:01 Eastern time. Shiloh Sanders did commit to South Carolina last night, and that gives the Gamecocks 23 counting towards this signing class. You can sign 25. They've got 21 newbies, but 2 others are counting. So that's 23. Now, one of those is the junior college defensive lineman, Green, who is a little bit up in the air as far as signing next month because he's got to show some academic progress and all that kind of stuff. So that could open up another spot, or if he does well, they'll sign him, and so be it. He'll be in that class. But right now, if you count him, then the Gamecocks have room for 2 more to sign. And you look at who they've got left on their board: Darius Washington, Jamie Robinson, DeQuantius Watts. Those appear to be the 3 left that they are looking at. And I would imagine, well, with Watts getting the Florida State offer and he being from Pensacola, I think that opens up some things for him. He might visit there this weekend. I'm not sure, not knowing what the coaches and what Muschamp wants to do. Does he want to take 2 more defensive backs, or would he like to have a defensive lineman and a defensive back? I don't know exactly what he would prefer there.
The one thing that surprises me is that they're not going to take another running back, it seems. And that, again, you were talking about wanting to get Thomas Brown in here to shore up possibly the running back room. And the fact that they're not going to get that, I don't know if that tells me that they just didn't like what's out there that's left, or that they just really feel like they have to get into other positions.
I don't think they could get anybody really hot and interested in them at the level that they want, and so they're going to save that spot for the 2020 class, where they do have some good running backs who are interested and who are coming in for visits.
But you have Tyson Williams, who's pursuing possibly a transfer in the portal. I mean, that, and again, not that he would necessarily make a big difference one way or the other toward the Gamecocks running back room, but I look back to what Brown said in the conversation we had with him when he first became available to us in the media. The Gamecocks running back play has probably been the most subpar part of Will Muschamp's tenure at South Carolina. And he was very honest about saying that. And it's not just because they have subpar running backs. They've had subpar line play for the first couple parts of that season. The line improved greatly last year, but they have very average running backs. They don't have one guy who's really superbly extended himself.
And of course, they haven't had health. Because your best running back all around, pass protection, catching the football, and running. Some do well at some things, but others don't do the complete package.
Well,
you don't have.
You're the biggest A.J. Turner fan in the world.
Exactly. Well, here's the key. A.J. Turner goes back. He doesn't play defensive back. And then I really think, as I mentioned to Phil last night, I think because of his lack of being able to stay healthy, hitting people, I think Jam Williams may move to wide receiver.
That's one thing that Will Muschamp has staunchly said against, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing if you think about what they have coming in defensively as far as that goes.
Yeah, A.J. Turner, I hope they don't waste this guy's career the rest of the way. I mean, if you're not going to play him at corner, then put him back at running back and find some way to use him. He is the one guy you've got who can hit the hole in a hiccup and be going full speed when he gets there, and he has that innate cutback ability. They say he can't take the pounding of the SEC in a game-to-game basis, but he's never really been given the chance.
Show me he can't.
Yeah.
And then he's really only wide out is they can line him up behind the quarterback, then walk him up in an empty set, and he plays the slot.
Yeah, I don't understand why a guy – a talent like him. And of course, we're not in practice and in the meetings and all this stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that we know more than the coaches do. They obviously do. They're going to play the best players in their minds.
Well, you know what one of the problems is?
It's hard to sit here and see that guy not being able to contribute because he has some things that the others don't have.
Here's the other problem they have with him. He's one of their best, if not their best, special teams player. There's another reason they don't like to use him a lot.
It's mysterious season of also Rico Dowdle just baffles me as well.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
We'll take a couple more phone calls as time warrants. 800-956-7266. Later on in this segment, we'll hear from Frank Martin after the Gamecocks' 3-point victory over Auburn. We'll still also hear from Brad Brownell after Clemson's loss to Florida State. And Clemson women's basketball coach Amanda Butler will join us in our next segment.
You know that Amanda, we gave her the Sports Talk kiss back in the football season when she first met with us. Yes, Brian, that's okay to say that. We gave her the Sports Talk kiss. We give the Sports Talk kiss to male and female coaches. Okay, we distribute it evenly, and it's worked well for her.
Is it sacrilegious to suggest that my favorite Palmetto pigskin in-season interview was not of a football coach, was with her talking basketball? Is that sacrilegious?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I think you can have your favorite as we move around the state.
Very good.
A couple of things I want to mention. Tennessee up on Vanderbilt 17-9. If you want to jump on the program, 800-956-7266. Frank Martin coming up, and also Brad Brownell. But after last night's games, the NCAA net ranking, which of course the NCAA committee uses when they get down to Selection Sunday, and South Carolina made a little bit of a move. The Gamecocks moved up 13 spots with their win. They're now 100 by the NCAA net ranking. Clemson, with its loss, and the Tigers had been up there through their November-December slate, but the struggles in the ACC costing them now. They dropped one spot to 58. And so Virginia is your number 1 team. Duke is number 2. Michigan State is 3. Tennessee would be 4. And Gonzaga would be number 5. Then it's Michigan, Houston, Kentucky, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech. Though Virginia Tech disappointed me. I know it's Chapel Hill. They played in the other night. Played them close for about a half, and then North Carolina put the old boot on the throat.
One other big NCAA tournament factor is the fact that USC now has as many Quadrant 1 wins, 3 of them, Auburn, Mississippi State, and the other one would be – who would be the other one for them?
For South Carolina?
Yes, the other Quadrant 1 win would be Florida.
Florida on the road.
Florida on the road, yes. Mm-hmm. Those are the 3 wins for them that have them now as many Quadrant 1 wins as the number 5 team, which is Gonzaga.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's all positive. They got to get many more wins. They're going to have to win because of their overall record. Now, I know that their December schedule and those good losses that they had will help them some, but still, you're probably looking at they're 5-1 in the SEC right now. Can they get to 12 SEC wins? Is that too optimistic? Can they get to 11 SEC wins, considering the strength of the league this year?
You only need 6 more to get to 11.
Yeah.
They are
easier said than done. I mean, because they still got to play Tennessee twice, still got to play Kentucky once, still got to go out to Missouri, still got Florida coming to Columbia. They got some tough ones still left on the schedule.
Well, but this team looks like they're together, and if they take the coaching, they play well. You could tell that at LSU, their minds were somewhere else.
If you look at the RPI, South Carolina is now 77 in the RPI.
Although they don't necessarily use that as much anymore.
Yeah, they use the net thing more, right?
The net is the new emphasis.
And I see them with, according to this RPI breakdown, I see them with 2 wins against. Were you saying RPI Group 1?
No,
or net
and net Quadrant. 1 wins.
Gotcha. Okay, they're at 77 in the RPI after their win last night. Clemson is 57 in the RPI after their loss last night.
The Quadrant thing with net takes into account, a larger pantheon of teams when you play on the road versus the ones that you play at home.
I imagine Frank was pretty happy after last night.
He was a bit exasperated. The one thing he did say is that he did kind of have to calm some of his younger staffers down in the locker room because of the fact that they did do some things that he was not necessarily happy about. They had multiple double-digit leads in that game that they blew that kept Auburn around, but most importantly, they got the victory. A lot of it thanks to Chris Silva with 32 points, a career high for him, and 14 rebounds, but Felipe Hasse, the hero.
Obviously, high-level basketball game, and I didn't think we played very well offensively. which created – we were inconsistent. I shouldn't say we didn't play well. We're very inconsistent how we played on offense. But that's more on me than the kids. They've played man-to-man 94% of total possessions on the year, and they went to that zone. And that zone, we didn't spend enough time preparing for that. We did, but we didn't spend as much time as we needed to. And that zone made us start standing around on offense, and it took our aggressiveness away that we had early in the game. And then we finally started attacking it in the second half, built the lead, and then just they made some hard shots. That's what they do, but we also had some bonehead offensive plays and hand checks that give them free throws.
Frank, could you run us through the play that got Hasse open in the corner for the three? And then just with him specifically, how much have you seen his confidence grow since that Florida game?
Yeah, I put him in the game because I knew I wanted to run this action we ran that we like to run, and I was going to involve Hassani and Chris in it. And Hassani's read in the action is either shoot, coming off that pin down the middle of the floor, drop it on Chris if he's got a good seal. Auburn did a hell of a job. They didn't give Chris the duck in, and they crowded Sani. And I had put Felipe in the game because he can shoot. So now you put him in the corner. So Sani has that whole right side to drive. And it's at the end of the day, it's kids having to make decisions. Sani drove. He could have been selfish and tried to shoot the ball, but he trusts. They made the mistake of helping off Felipe, so he makes the right play. And then obviously Felipe, who making shots is something where you need repetitions. And he hadn't gotten a shot off, I don't think, the second half, other than a couple tip-ins or whatever. And for him to have the courage to be ready and let it go and put it in the net, that's a credit to all those kids. They executed what was called, and then they made the right decision within the play.
Frank, after that LSU game, how much do you think Chris really needed a game like this one tonight?
Yeah, here's the great thing about Chris. He wasn't good, and neither was our team. And you know, some guys would pout and mope, and he took responsibility for it. And he came out and practiced. Sunday we practiced really hard. Like I took the foot off the pedal a little bit going into LSU because if you count today, that's 4 games in like 9-10 days or something like that. So I took the foot off, and you got to travel twice in between. So I took the foot off the pedal in practice leading into LSU, and we played that way. And so Sunday, I didn't care. We lost today because we were tired. I was okay with it, but we weren't going to go out there and get out of people's way. And Chris was phenomenal. But he's got to be on the court, you know, to help us win games. You know, when he's on the court, we've been saying this for the last 2 years. You know, he's on the court, he helps us, and he's playing. When he stays on the court, he does so many things that don't come up on stat sheets to help us win. I'm really, Chris is an unbelievable kid, and he's loyal to his core, and I'm really, really happy for him.
Yeah, that play that he mentioned about the three-pointer to Hasse, that was a beautiful play. I mean, that was well executed, and they got the ball to the right man at the right spot at the right time.
Well, they baited him to collapse, which was the one thing that you saw, and Hasse was wide open on that play. And we even asked him, he said, was being as wide open as you were distracting? And he said, no. And actually, you know, just in rhythm, you get enough repetitions, you shoot. And I keep coming back to the fact that Justin Minaya is going to be healthy at some point. I mean, I think that they're past the point where they're worrying about wanting to take a redshirt with him. I think if you think he can be a contributor for you this season, you got to figure out a way to get him involved. And then, you know, with as short as the rotation that they got going right now, because you got 7 guys who are basically main contributors. Frank and Hinson haven't necessarily done enough to be main contributors, but if you put him in there, that really turns the things around.
Do you do that? If you do that, then you've got to do it with a very strong belief that you're going to make the NCAA. You don't want to waste what little bit of season he'll have left if you're no better than an NIT team.
I think
you got to really believe you got a chance to make the NCAA.
Depends on
Would
how
you
these
agree with that?
Depends on how these next couple of games go.
Yeah,
I mean, if you're not looking at a very, you know, big sample size here, if you maybe go and get a victory over Tennessee or a Kentucky, then you got to maybe think that you're thinking about making the NCAA tournament.
And you have to let him come off the bench. I think that core starters, they're so comfortable with each other, and he'll be able to handle it. Minaya coming off.
Clemson women's basketball coach Amanda Butler next. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. It is now time and our pleasure to welcome in the head coach of the Clemson women's basketball team, Amanda Butler. Her team has really shot through like a rocket to start ACC play. 5-1 to start, 5 consecutive wins. Things have been going well for them. They play tomorrow night at NC State up in the Triangle, and Coach Butler kind enough to join us here on Sports Talk. And Coach, it's been a nice run. It's been a great turnaround. What has been the main key part of this turnaround for you guys, and how you've been able to get things kind of to come together?
You know, I don't know that there's just been one part. I can just tell you there's a group of really hardworking and eager women that, you know, that have created an identity for themselves and a way of playing that they're very proud of. And, you know, we've matched up really well with the competition in ACC games so far. But, you know, they just have really been dedicated to just getting a little bit better every day. And then we play our guts out. I mean, that's just kind of our style of play. It's usually pretty ugly, but we don't care. We're, you know, that's kind of become part of our identity. And but their eagerness and willingness to, you know, just dig in and do whatever it takes has been really inspiring.
You knew the challenges coming in with this program, and you met them head on. Where do you think your biggest progress has come?
You know, I think that, you know, just the expectation has really grown, you know, from the beginning of the year where it was, you know, very much, there was so much unknown to a level of confidence now where, you know, it's really fun to see, I think, young people in any endeavor, but certainly in our world, to see that sort of growth where there's belief in themselves and, you know, and expectations that, you know, they probably didn't have back in August, and coaching staff probably didn't either. You know, it was very much a discovery process of let's just work real hard and then let's not be too focused on results. And we're trying to maintain that mindset as, you know, as we go into these ACC ball games where, you know, you could play your very, very best and still lose by, you know, 10 or 15 points because the competition is so good. You know, but I think that level of confidence, they've earned the right to feel that way, and that's fun.
Amanda Butler, Clemson women's basketball coach, with us here on Sports Talk. One thing you got to like about your team is how you've handled your business in the conference on the road. Got 3 league road wins. You go on the road tomorrow night to play a very good NC State team. How about how your players have handled the road wars, come away with those wins, and kind of dealt with whatever adversity you might run across on the road?
You know, this team does a great job of really approaching each opportunity to compete with an awareness that we just got to try to make it about us. And where we're playing and who we're playing can't be the storyline. We've got to try to make the game be about the things that make us a good ball club, and the other things we can't get distracted by those. And, you know, we certainly to be able to go to Miami, to be able to go to Florida State, and then most recently to Pitt, those are very, very significant wins for our program and just for our growth overall as a group of people. You know, but I think our team's done a really good job of, you know, game after game, just looking at it as an opportunity for Clemson to play their best and not being too consumed with not just the team that we're playing, but where the ranking is or, you know, where we're playing the game or any of those things.
Well, us fans will talk about rankings because you've got your team playing well. They seem to be communicating with each other good on the floor. But now, as all mad scientists are, like a coach, you step right into the laboratory now because now in succession at NC State, you get number 1 at home in Notre Dame. And then I think, number 3 in Louisville? So this is really one – as you prepare for just this game, NC State, do you see a greater focus of your team at the blackboard as well as on the floor, attention to detail as they know what they're jumping in the next 3 ball games?
Well, you know, what you just laid out seems very overwhelming. And so that's why, you know, what we try to do is just make it as small of bites as we possibly can. And, you know, so the ball games that follow this next one, we'll get to those at a certain point, and they'll be enough for us to worry about. But NC State is undefeated, as good as anybody in the country at what they do. And so, we give that level of respect. I would like to think we give that level of respect to all of our opponents. But it just as you said, for fans and people that follow the game, I think the rankings and the opportunity looks bigger, on the outside. To us, we get a chance to compete, and we don't get a bonus point or a gold star, anymore for beating NC State than we did Pitt in the ACC race. It's going to count as either one win or one loss. And so what we want to do is just make sure that we play our absolute best. And that's the only thing that we can control.
Talking with Amanda Butler here on Sports Talk on South Carolina Radio Network. So, you know what it is like up at Clemson when the football team has got it going. Fans are caught up in that for a long, long time. Winning the national championship kept their attention all the way into mid-January. And so the basketball teams kind of operate in the shadows there for a little while, which in your case might not have been such a bad thing because it gave you a chance to kind of build and develop while people's attention maybe was somewhere else. So my question is now, with basketball being on center stage, men's and women's, are you sensing that Tiger fans are starting to come out and get behind you, and they're kind of sensing maybe a special start to your career with the Tigers?
Oh, the support has been so encouraging and so fun. And, and I just love it for our team, to not just be experiencing the success, but to be experiencing that level of attention and the spotlight being a little bit bigger than what it normally is. And, because they deserve that. They're good. They work hard. And, and I think, a lot of times when you start looking at other seasons, other sports, everything that happened with football, I think was a positive for all of us. I mean, how could that not make you want to be your best, but to be here and be side by side with those guys who at the end of their season are able to call themselves the absolute best. So all of those things, regardless of where the fans' attention was, I think we're all positive, not just for our program, but for all the Clemson Tigers, because we're really proud of those guys. But the fan support, it seems like every week it's doubling and tripling, and the amount of attention is growing, and that's exciting, because we want to be really relevant. We want to give people something to cheer about and be proud of.
Of course, your goal is on the task at hand, and you've got a great core of upperclassmen with Edwards and Kobe Thornton and Danielle Edwards and all those things. But you've also been able to try and work some of the future in. Hosendove is averaging the kind of minutes that she is, and you're obviously trying to work things out. How do you go about trying to, like Pro said earlier, work in the lab as much with your future as much as you have here with your present?
Well, we're doing everything we can to improve every day. Like I said, regardless of whether, you're a senior who's playing 30 or 35 minutes or whether you're an underclassman who's trying to earn more minutes. And, that's one of the things I really admire about our team, too, is not just how hard they work and how compliant they are with what we ask them to do, but they're really committed to their extra work and really trying to do things, I think, for the right reasons. Our style of play lends itself to spreading out minutes. We play a really physically demanding style. We like to run and we like to press, and what we do requires a lot of energy. And so that also gives us an opportunity to get deeper into our bench than a lot of the teams that we've played against. And I think ultimately, with the way that we've been able to perform in fourth quarters, that's been a big advantage for us. So, but the commitment to improvement is the thing that I think makes this team really, really special. And whatever improvement means, if that means improvement of your shot, or if that means improvement of your understanding of the game plan, or if that means improvement in terms of let me get in on Saturday morning and play 3-on-3 with our scout guys, which we have a group of players that do that because they're just trying to get as game ready as they can. Our team is all in on all those things.
Coach, we thank you so much. Good luck tomorrow night in Raleigh. We'll be watching. Hope it goes well for you.
Thanks so much. Go Tigers.
Thank you very much. Amanda Butler, women's basketball coach at Clemson, off to a great start in year one.
They have their weekend bye this weekend, but they're back home at Little John on the 31st of January. So that's the next chance for Clemson fans to see them. We'll hear from Brad Brownell a little bit next on the men's side as well.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Now, Vandy hanging tough with number 1 Tennessee in Nashville. They go to the half. The Vols are up 38-37. They had remember, Tennessee jumped out to a big lead. Vandy shot poorly to start, 2 of 8. And then went 12 of 17 to finish the half. So they are very much in it.
These two conferences, man, SEC and ACC, winning on the road is something that is incredibly tough.
LSU up on Georgia at home, 46-32. By the way, if you want to catch them, Oklahoma State's on ESPNU tonight at 9 Eastern time against Oklahoma. That's South Carolina's next opponent. The Cowboys are 8-10 on the season. Of course, Michael Boynton, the former Gamecock, is their coach. NC State will be Clemson's next opponent in Raleigh on Saturday afternoon. 15-3 overall, 11-1 at home, 3-2 in the league, and their RPI is only 114. I guess their strength of schedule is probably their non-conference strength of schedule 349. NC State,
Oof.
yeah, but their net is still 27. Here we are throwing out all these numbers, and what does it all mean, people? What does it all mean?
They're really only they beat Auburn in the non-conference. I mean, they played Vanderbilt. They beat Vanderbilt. Their only loss in the non-con came to Wisconsin. So I mean, they're not bad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was Auburn's first loss. That was in Raleigh.
And Clemson does not, of course, play well anywhere on Tobacco Road. That's 2:00 on Saturday. Last night, the Tigers weren't on Tobacco Road. They were on. They were in downtown Tallahassee, off of Tennessee Street, is where the Leon. They still call it Leon Civic Center. They changed that
Tallahassee Leon County Civic Center.
Well, didn't they change it? Isn't there a branding name there at that arena?
They probably gave somebody's name to the floor. I don't know about that.
Anyway, Florida State, 3-game losing streak going in. They're too talented.
Donald L. Tucker Center.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so anyway, 3-game losing streak. Clemson looking to build on its win over Georgia Tech. Got off to a really good start, but couldn't hang on in the second half. Here is what Brad Brownell, he only gave the media, only needed about 2 minutes afterwards to discuss everything with the media down there. Here's what he said.
Florida State completely outplayed us in the second half. Nichols played very well for them off the bench, made a bunch of shots, which I thought gave them a tremendous lift. Disappointed with the way we defended in the second half. I thought our offensive struggles affected our defense. We just didn't play the way we needed to play in the second half against a very good team that was, playing well. They obviously shoot it well. When they make 10 threes, they're a handful. So congratulations to them.
Coach, can you talk about in this league how tough it is to get a win on the road?
Yeah, it's obviously very difficult. Guys usually play better at home, make more shots. We were in great position. We scored out of the gate, went up 8 to start the second half, and then I thought we got away from some of the things we were trying to do. I thought guys tried to make too many one-on-one plays, and they we didn't execute exactly what we wanted to in the second half, and because of that, they were able to make a nice run. And you expect that, especially at home against a team with a lot of pride.
Coach, Florida State had struggled shooting threes coming into this game. Was it something that you tried to force them to do?
Yeah, I don't want to force them to do it, but we certainly, we try to protect the paint a little bit more than we do in some other games, and they made us pay. They made some in the first half, but they didn't have any offensive rebounds, and we were ahead and we were playing well on offense. And then the second half, when we started struggling a little bit, they made a few more. They got some offensive rebounds. They got to the line, I think, a little bit more. It was just a combination of a lot of little things that they just played a very good second half.
All right, tough loss for Clemson last night on the road, staying on the road against NC State on Saturday. Joe Lunardi's most recent bracket from ESPN is Bracketology. I'm always taking a look to see where, of course, Wofford is the lone state team that these bracketologists are putting in. We should mention, by the way, Wofford, undefeated in the Southern Conference. They are 26th, I believe it is, in the net. Mm-hmm. So they're way on up there. But as far as the Columbia Regional is concerned, Lunardi has Duke and Virginia coming to Columbia. Duke as a 1 seed playing the winner of the 16 play-in game, A&M, Prairie View A&M, and Sam Houston State. And then he's got the 8-9 game, TCU and Washington. The Virginia game, number 1 Virginia against Rider, a 16 seed. Look out, Virginia. Happened to you last year. Mm-hmm. And the 8-9 game, it's got a terrible sense of humor. Kansas State against Indiana. Frank Martin's old team coming into his building and playing. But you know what? That'd be kind of neat to have an Indiana group here. The Hoosier fans travel big.
They travel.
Yeah, that'd be kind of neat to see people like that who are so like Duke fans and Virginia fans to some degree, but Indiana fans are really eating up with basketball.
They are.
And I was about to say Frank Martin's assistant, Martin, was
Chuck Martin.
Chuck Martin was at Indiana.
Right.
Yeah. I hate to use a word that's been thrown around a little bit, that if you want to talk about the delusional basketball fan base, Indiana.
Yeah.
Crazy.
He's got Michigan State and Tennessee as the other number ones.
I've always wanted a pair of those pants, that they have, the little warm-up pants.
A guy from Kentucky told me a joke that I think is clean enough. He said, what is a Kentucky pervert?
What?
What is a Kentucky pervert?
Give it to me.
It's a person who loves sex more than basketball.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I could get that in that
state.
state.
Sounds about right. or horse racing.
Yeah.
Either way.
By the way, great news. Furman is opening spring football practice on Friday.
You got to be.
We got football. Well, Furman always goes early. They traditionally have gone early.
It's not even the spring.
They begin, and you should be there. In fact, I'd like you to be there at the start of practice. Their first practice will be at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, hell no.
At Paladin Stadium.
Hell no.
On January 25th.
That'll be canceled for the snow.
Well, with all due respect to Clay Hendricks.
Going back to the Dick Sheridan years, Furman has always had spring practice early. Their theory is practice it early. If we have some injuries, they'll have extra time to get healthy. You know, when you're limited in numbers, you got to look at it that way.
Well, that was what Muschamp did last year. They started uncharacteristically early, and they had their spring game on the 31st of March. Of course, this year, I thank both Will Muschamp and Dabo Swinney for having both having their spring game on the same day. It happens to be on my birthday. Thanks, guys. Thanks
I think they looked at the birthday calendar just to.
It's also the same day as the Final Four.
Furman will have 8 returning starters back on offense, all 5 of their linemen. That's a good sign for them. And then 6 returning starters on defense. So their thing is, they've got to they were a good team towards the end of the year. Thought maybe they were going to sneak into the playoffs, and they've just got to really get off to a better start. In both of Clay's 2 years at Furman, they've kind of struggled in the one-loss category early on. It's kind of put them behind the 8 ball. Then they kind of get it going and fight their way back in it. But if you want to go see some football practice, head up to Furman, 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday.
I'm ready.
They'll be out there. Well, they won't be in the full gear. They'll have their helmets and shorts on. Will they have their shorts on? I'm not sure.
Did you say when they're playing their spring game?
Yeah, their spring game is going to be
Valentine's Day, probably.
Wait a minute. They've got February 23rd. Yeah, 1 o'clock. They're actually going to have a practice, one more practice after their spring scrimmage, 1 o'clock at Paladin Stadium. Looks like all their practices are in at 6 o'clock in the morning. Not all of them, but a majority of them are at 6 o'clock in the morning.
They're trying to get frostbite?
Well, I guess they got classes.
Yeah.
At Furman, you do have to go to class. That is a prerequisite.
Yes, you have.
They give out real degrees,
I think so.
Unlike North Carolina.
All right. Any final thoughts? Oh, tomorrow night we are extremely excited. We'll be over at Founders Park. It'll just be us with Mark Kingston. He'll be with us right off the top of the program. We'll probably have him for a couple of segments. We'll break down the beginning of baseball practice at USC, get his thoughts on his team. And, boy, tell you what, get a roster ready because there are going to be a bunch of new names on there.
Might have some those name tags to get people adjusted to that. Second hour of the program tomorrow, we'll talk to Mike Morgan. Also, a real treat, Gary Parrish, CBS Sports, will join us to talk about a great charity involving South Carolina and Clemson, and also a little hoops with both of those.
All right, guys, have a great night. Thank you all for joining us across the state here on Sports Talk. We'll see you tomorrow night.